Funding for the production of Folks is provided in part by the Friends of LPB.
Glenda Lorenz is an example of women who are exercising their newly liberated status. When Glenda began her business 2 years ago, she felt that being a minority female enhanced her chances to qualify for financing.
A woman working at this Amoco processing plant in Denham Springs, Louisiana? Not too long ago, that would have been unheard of. But today you'll find Georgia Davis working at the plant as a roustabout, fitting right in with her male peers.
Hello, everyone. I'm Rob Hinton.
And I'm Genevieve Stewart. Have minority women achieved a degree of political clout? What about their fair share of Louisiana's economic pie?
These are just two of the questions we'll put to our guests, Louadrian Reed, Director of the Women's Office for the City of New Orleans, and Pat Evans, Director of the Women's Advocacy Bureau here in Baton Rouge.
That and more, today on Folks.
Everybody's just folks, just plain old folks. Everybody just people all over the world. Folks to live, folks got to give, folks got to care, ooh, folks got to share. Our world is small, so very small. What touches one of all, ooh, touches us all. So stay alive, just to survive. Folks got to be in harmony. Everybody just folks, just plain old folks, just plain old folks. Everybody just folks, everybody just folks, just plain old folks, just plain old folks. Everybody just folks.
The roles of women in Louisiana are changing, particularly minority women. You see, many minority women are changing from employee to employer by owning and operating their own businesses. Glinda Lorenz is an example of women who are exercising their newly liberated status. When Glinda began her business 2 years ago, she felt that being a minority female enhanced her chances to qualify for financing. Thus, Llorens Shoe Store opened its doors in a fashionable shopping center. Under the expert management of its owner, the business is financially sound and successful. As a woman, what is the most difficult aspect of running your own business?
I would say that having salesmen or suppliers take you seriously, not thinking that because you are a woman, you're in this for a hobby, and if it does not work out that you'll decide to just sell and go into something else. When they see that it's not all fun and games and you're not here just to pass an 8-hour day, that you're serious about the business, that you want the business to grow, the feeling, you can just get the feeling from them that, hey, this lady knows what she's talking about, this lady's on the ball, she's serious about having this business grow and prosper.
Was being a minority woman to your advantage or your disadvantage in finding financing?
It worked as an advantage. At the particular time, there were direct SBA funds available for females, and being a minority, double minority, female and black, it did assist me or help me in obtaining those funds. I'm not saying that those funds would have been given to me for the business only on being female and minority, but I had a definite goal. I showed SBA that projections were good, that again it was not fun and games, it was a business, and that in itself helped also.
In less than 1 year after opening Llorens Shoe Store, the political climate began shifting towards social and economic conservatism. Minority women with business aspirations were affected by the change in availability of credit. Freya Rivers is one such woman. The owner of a designer boutique bearing her name, she experienced difficulty in obtaining financing to buy her now thriving business. Armed with a PhD, experience in retailing, and a dream, she prevailed and made Freya's an established name in fashion vocabulary. Was being a woman to your advantage or disadvantage in finding financing?
disadvantage. You'll find that most men, if they have any type of job experience, can walk into a bank, lay out what their proposal is, what the future holds for them, do a projection, and, you know, just do a business plan, and the banker will work with them. I know that we are in a very tight money situation right now, but I found it especially hard. If it had not been for my father, there would have been no way that I'd been able to break into this business at all.
What was the most difficult aspect in starting your own business?
The most difficult aspect of getting started, and the most difficult aspect even today, is credit. And again, I'm investigating the possibility, is it because I am female or minority, or maybe a combination of both? But I found that many businesses smaller than this one, many businesses that are making a lot less money, many businesses that have poor credit are able to get credit.
Genevieve, despite the problems they encounter in setting up their own business, do they appear to be happy at what they're doing?
Oh, definitely. Those are truly two success stories here of women who prevailed over unfortunate circumstances in some instances and have done very well for themselves.
You know, not only are we seeing minority women successful in their own businesses, there are also a lot of minority women taking on non-traditional jobs.
Amoco processing plant in Denham Springs, Louisiana. Not too long ago, that would have been unheard of. But today you'll find Georgia Davis working at the plant as a roustabout, fitting right in with her male peers.
I think they're a great bunch of guys. I'm here to help them, and in return they help me. I've learned a great deal since I've been here because of them.
Georgia has only been a roustabout for about 6 months. She became interested in electrical mechanics through the Women's Training Program, a branch of the Women's Advocacy Bureau.
You know, we usually don't think of women in the field as electrical mechanics. How did you become interested?
As you know, in the past 10 years, Louisiana has grown in industry-wise tremendously. And it's turned out pretty good jobs for young men and women. And the field was wide open for women. And I thought that it would be a great opportunity for me to be involved in it.
The Women's Training Program is an offshoot of the Women in Employment Program, which began over 6 years ago. The Women's Training Program originated last year. We had our first 9-month training program, and this year, with the help of our industry board, we've condensed our training program to 3 13-week programs. So this is actually the second year that we've had a training program. Our class size last year, we had 19. We have 20 slots per 13-week session this year, so we'll actually be able to train 60 women in Baton Rouge. We do have a sister program that is in New Orleans, and they will also be able to train 60 women in New Orleans area. We teach basic electricity, we teach blueprint reading, we have mechanical devices that they're trained on, we have a whole component on math, and we also teach physical fitness for upper body strength.
How has Georgia benefited from her training and work experience?
After the help that Amoco gave the class, I figured, well, these are the people that I want to work for. A roustabout, operator, whatever they needed that I can do, I was willing to do it. And I fought to get that done. And I am very proud of myself. I'm also very happy with my job. I love it.
Now, we'll have the address and phone number of the Women's Training Program at the end of the program. And based on what I saw at the Women's Training Center, I guess we're going to see more and more women in blue-collar jobs.
I certainly hope we will, Rob. And I'd like to get the reaction of our guests. We have as our guest today Louadrian Reed, Director of the Women's Office for the City of New Orleans, and Pat Evans, Director of the Women's Advocacy Bureau here in Baton Rouge. Welcome to Folks.
Delighted to be with you.
Legal considerations aside, wouldn't you say that women's economic gains have been far greater than their political strides?
In terms of what we have here in the Capitol representing women, yes, they have. We only have 3 women representing all of the women in the state. We have none in the council chambers in New Orleans. We have 4 judges that we were just talking about in our trip here. So the political gains have not been very great. They're there, but in very few numbers.
I think if we realistically separate the two, as far as the 2 parts of your question, the economic gains, for every dollar a man earns in the state of Louisiana, doing the same work that a woman is doing, a woman earns 49 cents. I don't think that we can call these strides astronomical. I think minority women who are in business are very much the exception. Minority women who are doing non-traditional kinds of skilled craft jobs are very much the exception. Amoco and an industry board have been very kind and generous in giving us both the benefit of their expertise and in also opening up opportunities for women. But that generosity, in my opinion, has not really closed that gap. In other words, people like the woman we saw who work for Amoco make good, decent wages so they can support themselves, their families, and their children. But what we are talking about, in my opinion, is we're seeing that in the 80s we have seen a phenomenon called the feminization of poverty in this country. During the last decade, during the 70s, we saw an actual total swing in the people who were poor in this country. We saw that as 1 million men got out of poverty during the 70s, 1 million women entered poverty. So it's a different kind of poverty. We're also having projections by people who like to make projections and look at the economy, telling us by the year 2000, if this trend continues, that 100% of the people who are poor in this country will be women and children. So we say, why is this? Because we have seen an astronomical growth in the number of women who head households. We also see something that is one of the major social problems in the state of Louisiana, a tragedy of the absolute utmost magnitude, the incident of teenage pregnancy in this state. The fact that we have the dubious distinction of being second in the nation in the number of young women who get pregnant during their teens. And what happens is, if you're 15 years old and if you're 16 years old and this happens to you, you make a decision to keep this baby, then without a doubt you are headed straight for welfare rolls, straight for poverty, and all the attendant social problems that go with that, child abuse, drug addiction. So I would say that it's absolutely an impossible situation to compare political gains and economic gains. We're talking about 2 separate entities, and I do not see us as women in the state of Louisiana, and especially my concern for minority women, as having made many inroads in the last 10, 15, or 20 years.
Are you saying the women's movement hasn't helped at all, or much at all?
No, I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is that I think that basically we saw a phenomena that was happening in this country that the country refused to recognize as a phenomena that it was, that the influx of women into the labor market, and everybody was saying this is going to portend grave social changes for this country. But I think that we weren't prepared to look at those social changes and what they were going to mean. Now, the fact is, we see 900 women serving in state legislatures throughout the United States of America. We see women as mayors of the major cities in the United States of America: Chicago, San Francisco, Houston, Phoenix. So we do see some gains. We see some political gains, and I think that we are also recognizing the fact that women can govern, and we're also recognizing the fact that women can make a social and an economic contribution to the welfare of this country. But I don't see staggering gains for the state of Louisiana. We rank next to Mississippi at the bottom rung of the ladder in the number of women we have serving in government in policy-making decisions. We have 3 women in our House of Representatives, none in our state Senate. And the fact is that many, many other states, you know, have many, many larger numbers of women making this kind of policy. And I think especially when we look at the actual dearth of minority women making policies for themselves and their families and their people.
What do you think it's going to take to increase those numbers, let's say at the state capitol?
I think what we're saying, Rod, in my opinion, you know, unequivocally we're saying that we as women need to take those risks. We need to get out there and fight the good battle politically and economically. Also, I do think we're legitimizing the concerns of women. I also see minority organizations such as the Urban League really recognizing for the fact that minority women's problems are their primary concern now. It's not enough to get black males out of poverty as long as black women are getting into poverty. This doesn't increase the gap of poverty. In other words, so we're looking at this as a phenomena that really takes the best imagination, the best brains that we have to solve it, because we will never solve our social problems as long as this is happening. Now, if we're willing to look at the peculiar problems of minority women in poverty, that this is a woman's problem. The poverty that women experience is decidedly different from what we call the male pauper model. In other words, there are two things that conspire to keep women poor, and especially minority women. One is the fact that they bear and rear children. And the second is that they have very, very limited job opportunities, and in my opinion, still have. And the program that we have at the Women's Bureau that has increased the number of women into skilled craft jobs has done a fabulous job. We have over 1,000 more women in these kinds of jobs than we had when we started the program, but it's not nearly enough. And I don't think that public policy in the state of Louisiana has nearly addressed this problem.
Louadrian, could you answer why it seems that the women's rights movement, in terms of the upper ranks, is visibly void of minority representation?
I don't think they've gone out to the groups and welcomed them in wholesale. It's been a matter of not enough education. I don't think that any woman would not join the ranks in fighting for equality. After all, who are the first to benefit, actually? But women have been so bogged down with fighting their own battles just to get bread on the table that they really haven't had the time to go out and seek that kind of thing, especially in the lower echelon, the lower class women. If you work all day in a back-breaking job, how much time and interest or anything else do you have to give to life when you're finished? You know, you're just wiped out. As opposed to the other women who are middle class, who have a job that is not as strenuous, who don't have as many kinds of problems to face when they get home, their opportunity to do these kinds of things is quite different. And it has to be an education, and the answer to everything can't be education, but we have to do something to alleviate the apathy, and I don't necessarily consider it an apathy. It's just the case where they just haven't had the opportunity to see exactly what needs to be done for them, and that every step we make not only helps us, it helps everybody. It helps the community. It's a kind of community education that needs to be done.
Are the Napoleonic codes still a serious consideration here in Louisiana, Louadrian?
Not as much as you would think. The same kinds of rules prevail in other states, but they do hamper us somewhat here.
How far did the defeat of the Equal Rights Amendment, how far did that set back gains for women?
It didn't do anything for us. You can believe that it hasn't helped us at all. The fact remains that it has gone back when session opened again in Congress this year. It's back again. It's not one of those things that will fade away, that too many people that are affected for us to just forget about it. And fortunately, we do have some very great people who are on our side who are not going to let it end that way.
So does it mean that the women's movement that we used to hear of like 10 years ago, is it still alive? Or?
It's still alive. I think it's taken a different look. Rightfully so. I think the next way we move will be a much better way. Everything has its good points, and maybe the fact that it failed will gear us all up in a new kind of thrust to get the job done now. And when you think in terms of the civil rights movement, how long did it take to get it passed? This one started even as far back I know from BPW, which is the Business and Professional Women, started that movement of ERA in 1921, so it's not it's not new to the world at all.
Do you feel as though you're gaining momentum or losing ground as far as women's equality?
I don't think we're doing either. I think we saw that status quo at this point. One of the things that's interesting, though, I was doing some reading about where professions have gained, and I think attorneys have made greater strides than anybody else. In 1878, the first woman attorney finished from a university in Chicago Union, I think. 3 years later, it was declared unconstitutional for a woman to become a lawyer. A woman called Clara Foltz, then in California, about 10 years later, decided that she would take up the movement and made it possible in California for women to become attorneys and to pass the bar. Now, it was still the Ivy League schools in the early 50s and 60s were having Ladies' Day because they didn't believe in pitting the man against the woman. Now, in 1980, I have a daughter who's now in law school, and she tells me that almost half of her class is female now. So that's one of the instances where great strides have been made. Let's hope that there will be greater strides in the future for some other professions.
Let's pretend for a moment that I'm a minority female who knows nothing about the women's movement. And if the statistics that Pat quoted to us are correct, the women's movement has been around for a decade, but you have said it within the last decade, 1 million women have gone into poverty. So consequently, if I'm a minority female that knows nothing about the movement, I'm going to ask you, what's in it for me? Why should I bother to join if in the last 10 years more women have gone into poverty?
If you do nothing else but think of the dollar, it will benefit you. You know, when you think in terms of you earning 49 cents on the dollar to the mail, that should say everything to you right there. But let's go a little bit farther. I want my daughters to have a fair shake at it. So if it's not going to happen to me, let it please happen for my 3 kids that are in the job market also. Let them not have to do the fighting that we have had to do. Let a little bit more of the fruits of labor be worked on them.
Is the dollar the reason we're now seeing more women entering male-dominated arenas?
Yes, actually, there are over 400 occupational classifications in this country, Rod. Women are clustered in 20 of them. So what happens is, what has prevailed in this country is we have a dual labor market. In the primary labor market, you see high-paying jobs, good benefits, chances for promotion, and that sort of thing. That primary labor market is mostly occupied by white males. Then you have a secondary labor market in this country, and this is dead-end jobs, minimum wage, no benefits, low unionization, and that secondary labor market is mostly occupied by black males and white and black females. And what happens is, if you become unemployed, you may find a job, but it usually is back in that secondary labor market. So the people who are in the primary labor market, you know, stay in the primary labor market. The people who are in the secondary labor market stay in that. We also have a very, very cruel hoax that, in my opinion, has been played on women in poverty, and that is we have a dual welfare system that has failed people. We as public policymakers need to look at that. We have a welfare system that transfers income. It's an income transfer program for women who are heads of households, have dependent children, and we want to aid those children. These women do not work. Then we have a secondary kind of welfare system that aids poor working women. It tries to give them the support, the kinds of benefits people usually get in that secondary labor market. And consequently, the policies that are being made now by the governments that we are a part of, that I am a part of, is the fact that it is not helping poor working women. It's helping them get out of that secondary and get back into a welfare system that says, hey, I can't afford to work if my benefits are taken away from me, if I'm a poor working woman. So I think what we're saying is policies, public policies, clearly must look at female poverty as something that is peculiar to women who are in poverty.
Well, how successful is the women's lobby in Louisiana? Are politicians restrained or are they responsive?
I think what we saw, one of the things Louadrian was talking about, we saw the politicization of women as far as working for the Equal Rights Amendment. Suddenly they went into those committee rooms, they began to lobby, and they learn the rules of the game. So clearly what we're seeing now, I think women are becoming, they're on the threshold of becoming a political entity. We read something in the news media called the gender gap, that clearly for the first time since the 20s, women vote significantly different from the way men vote. And there are about 4 issues that separate that vote out. They're concerned about peace, nuclear disarmament, they're concerned about the cuts in social service programs, they're concerned about the environment, and they're concerned about the things, the welfare of their own families. So I think one pollster, Lou Harris, said clearly that women's vote will make the difference whether or not the Republican Party becomes a majority party in the 1980s, and it's that difference whether or not the Democratic Party will in fact become or remain a majority party. So I say for the first time we see little pockets of power.
All right, that's good to say that we have a strong women's lobby now, but I'd like to go back to my other question. Are the politicians responsive, or are they still restrained?
I think you saw something that was most responsive politically in the special session. The fact one of the big issues of the special session was family violence, which is clearly a woman's issue, and the fact that we came out of the special session with a clear vote to increase the money for family violence programs. So indeed, I think they're responsive to the political realities, that women are concerned about these things, and we saw women clearly lobbying at the state capitol during the last few weeks, clearly saying, yes, this is what we want, and this is what we need, and they were being very, very political about it.
Louadrian, one quick question. Being a black and a female, is that a handicap or an asset?
It's been both. It truly has. It has hampered me in doing some of the kinds of things right in City Hall as far as my job is concerned, being a female. And then it has been to my advantage in being able to take a dual role. Sometimes it's a monster with a double head, but on the other hand, it sometimes takes a dual role, and I take the place of being maybe token, but I learn, and I'm there to show the other side of the coin to those that are
You think
in
more
office.
black women should look at it as a challenge?
Oh,
in this name?
definitely, yes, and never refuse. You have to be there to make a change. And it may not be a significant change, but every little bit helps.
Give me one word in 30 seconds that you project for the late 80s for the women's movement.
One word.
Success?
And change.
Wonderful. That sounds great. Our time is up today with our guests, and I'd like to thank them for a very informative time. Louadrian Reed and Pat Evans, you've just been wonderful today. As promised, if you are interested in the training program, you will get more information by writing the program at 3250 North Acadian Thruway, Baton Rouge 70805, or phone 504-342-2729.
We here at Folks would also like to hear from you, your comments and suggestions for future programs. Write to us in care of LPB, 626 North 4th Street, Baton Rouge 70804. February is Black History Month. Next week we begin the first of 4 programs dealing with Black history. We'll be focusing on Flint Goodrich Hospital in New Orleans, a part of the black heritage here in Louisiana that was recently sold. Until that time, so long.
Funding for the production of Folks is provided in part by the Friends of LPB.